Hello everyone and welcome to my Bachelor Nation 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Joan Vassos admits feeling like a cheater. Moving on. The Golden Bachelorette star, Joan Vassos, discusses some of her challenges with dating, and multiple men at that, on reality TV. While her heart is still tied to her first husband, she is having a difficult time. Specifically, she admits she feels like a cheater after moving on to a new man. Joan Vassos has her work cut out for her. Although it is exciting for Joan Vassos to be the first ever Golden Bachelorette, she struggles with some feelings that surface during filming. Not only is it difficult to get out of her comfort zone and date 24 men at once, but she is also grieving. Undeniably, the lineup of fashionable men is easy on the eyes, but it comes with torture for Joan's soul. However, she isn't giving in on the Bachelor Nation process that easily. Even so, she is battling a deep-seated feeling of being a cheater to her first husband, Joan. Joan Vassos admits feeling like a cheater. Moving on. Undoubtedly, Joan Vassos cherishes the time she spent with her husband of 32 years, Joan Vassos. Without a doubt, she thought he was a stand-up guy. However, she lost him to pancreatic cancer in 2021 amid the COVID-19 pandemic. As such, she wasn't able to properly grieve his death. Joan told People, "My husband passed away during COVID, and I really didn't embrace the whole mourning thing." Admittedly, the 61-year-old did her best to pick herself up and keep moving. She says, "I was in charge of being strong. I just buckled down and ignored it." When Joan started meeting the men on the Golden Bachelorette, she was building new relationships and was quickly blindsided by ambushing feelings of cheating. She says, "I had to face it." Although she had sought out grief counseling, many groups were not available during the pandemic. After filming began, she says, "It was in my face that I was feeling really guilty, honestly, about having feelings for somebody else." Unmistakably, as she opened her heart again, it was simultaneously breaking. Admittedly, she says, "I almost felt like I was cheating on John, which is crazy because he's passed away." John gave Joan a gift. Although the process of offering her heart to someone new has been difficult for Joan Vassos, she shares a beautiful gift from her late husband. Before passing, he told her, "I want you to find somebody. You are the greatest wife in the world. I don't want you to be alone. I want you to find somebody." Even with his permission, she still holds guilt about moving on. However, she explains that the Golden Bachelorette's team of psychiatrists helped her overcome some of her hesitations. She says, "They said, you don't have to let go of John." Further easing her mind, they add, "Picture it like this. You have two balloons, one in each hand, and John is in a balloon in this hand, and your potential person that you're going to fall in love with in this hand. You don't have to let go of him from this hand to pick this one up and have a life with this one." Admittedly, it was the picture she needed to allow herself to explore. And it was such a good lesson. Joan Vassos accepts the process of grief. Since Joan Vassos gave herself space to breathe and understand it is a situation of more, not instead, she was able to talk with the suitor about her husband. Joan confesses, "You're trying to establish a relationship with somebody else. You don't want to talk about your deceased spouse, but keeping his memory alive didn't seem like I was being weird." Likewise, she describes, "I felt comfortable finally doing it. I talked about how funny he was and stuff like that, and I feel like the guys really appreciated that." But her positive light on her spouse gave room for her suitors to be vulnerable about their previous spouses as well. She adds, "It opened up the door to talk about people that were really important parts of your lives." Furthermore, now she better understands how grief works for her. She says, "You can't ignore it. It's going to be there. Talking about it and letting it out makes it more, almost joyful." Freedom through acceptance. While it was scary for Joan Vassos to unlock her grief, it was therapeutic. She reflects, "I went from not being able to think about him or even having a picture in my house that I could see every day. I had pictures in the guest room and other parts of the house I don't see every day. to the point where now I'm feeling so much better about it. Now, she feels free to share his memory. Then she adds, putting his name on a bench or planting a tree. None of these things are good enough. Further sharing. So I said, you know what I think he would like the most? Is that you don't forget him. Tell me stories. It doesn't hurt me anymore. It makes me happy. Joan Vassos sat on the edge of her neatly made bed, staring at her reflection in the vanity mirror across the room. The light from the early morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains, casting a soft glow on the room. But despite the warmth, Joan couldn't shake the cold pit growing in her stomach. Today was a day she never thought would come. A day she dreaded but knew was inevitable, moving on. For weeks, her friends had been nudging her, gently encouraging her to take the next step, to try to put herself out there. They'd tell her it was time to reclaim her life. It was the same story. You've got to let go, Joan. He's gone. But that's the thing. They said it as if it were simple. As if the word gone erased the memories, the years, the laughter, and the love she and Michael had shared. As if the silence in the house didn't still echo with his voice. And now here she was, a few hours away from her first date since Michael's passing. The thought of it alone felt like betrayal. Like she was breaking some sacred bond that time hadn't managed to sever. Joan's heart fluttered as she picked up her phone, glancing at the texts from her best friend Denise. You're going to do great. You deserve this. Be yourself, Joe. He'll love you for it. Joan tossed the phone back onto the bed with a sigh. She knew Denise meant well. Everyone did. But they didn't understand the heavy weight of moving on when your heart was still tethered to someone who wasn't there anymore. A cheater. That's how Joan felt, as if by stepping out of the shadow of her grief, by even considering someone else, she was cheating on Michael. How could she move forward when part of her still looked back, yearning for what once was? The guilt was overwhelming, like a tidal wave crashing over her, pulling her into an ocean of memories that she couldn't escape. Every laugh shared with Michael, every tender kiss, every whispered, I love you felt so vivid in her mind, as if time had frozen them in place. They were her treasures, moments of happiness that no one could take away. And yet, in moving on, she felt as though she was willingly leaving them behind, betraying him in the worst possible way. Joan stood and made her way to the closet, pulling out the dress Denise had insisted she wear. It was simple, classic. A pale blue wrap dress that hugged her figure just right, a color Michael had always loved on her. She ran her fingers along the fabric, her mind drifting to a time when Michael had surprised her with flowers, just because. That was who he was, the man who made her feel loved in the quiet moments, when no one was watching. How could she even think of sharing those moments with someone else? Tears pricked at the corners of Joan's eyes as she slipped into the dress. The room suddenly felt too small, too stifling, as if the very air was pushing in on her. She pressed her palms to her cheeks, trying to calm herself, to remind herself that this wasn't about forgetting Michael. It was about finding some semblance of joy again. It was about living, about honoring what they had by allowing herself the chance to breathe freely once more. She'd spent the last 2 years cocooned in her grief, drowning in the stillness of a life without him. She'd been so sure that she would never want to move on, that her heart would never be open to the idea of love again. But as the months had passed, Joan had come to realize that maybe Michael would have wanted this for her. Wanted her to find happiness, even if it wasn't with him. That thought, though comforting at times, also felt like a double-edged sword. She didn't want to let go of him, but she couldn't deny that the idea of companionship, of being seen and cherished again, stirred something deep within her. Joan sat back down on the bed, her hands trembling as she adjusted her dress. The date wasn't some grand romantic gesture, just coffee with a kind man named Greg, who'd been introduced to her by a mutual friend. He wasn't Michael, and that was the point. He wasn't supposed to be. The sound of her phone vibrating snapped her out of her thoughts. She picked it up and saw another message from Denise. You got this, Joe. Don't back out now. Joan smiled faintly. Denise knew her well, maybe even too well. Joan's fingers hovered over the reply button. What was she going to say? that she couldn't do this, that it felt too soon, too wrong, that deep down, she still felt like she was betraying Michael's memory. The truth was, she didn't know if there would ever be a right time to move on. No date on the calendar would ever be far enough away from the grief. No amount of encouragement would make the weight of her guilt disappear. But maybe that was part of the process. Understanding that grief, love, and moving forward could coexist, tangled in an uneasy but necessary dance.